All right. Hello. Welcome. I'm Carolina Valencia. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Communications at Epicenter NYC. If you have not heard about us, we're a local media organization. We cover local news, we feature small businesses, spotlight artists, and we get resources out to the community. Before we continue, give me a moment. I would like to say a few words in Spanish for anyone that speaks Spanish and would like to listen into this discussion. La conversación, hola, ¿cómo están? Soy Carolina Valencia, directora de comunicaciones para Epicenter. Esta conversación se llevará a cabo en inglés, pero vamos a tener traducción al español. Si quieren llamar para escuchar toda la información, llamen al 929-436-2866 y la clave es 858-1315-6764 y presionen la tecla numeral. Okay, so thank you all for joining us. We partner with Adrián Cepeda, known as the Book Papi on TikTok, to host this conversation here at the Worldsboro Bookshop in Jackson Heights, Queens. We're thrilled to be here to bring an important discussion with such a wonderful and passionate special education advocate here, Jenn Choi, who is going to share important information about how to prepare and navigate IEP discussions. So start dropping your questions in the comments and be ready to ask as soon as we open it up. Jenn, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you.
This is going to be, it's so important to share this information. We want to make this process as manageable as possible. We know how emotional and consuming it is. And it's important that parents and families have the resources they need to be able to set up their child for success. So let's get started. There's a question that I want to ask you and all of you to put in the comments, which is, what is the wildest or more surprising thing you've been told or heard in an IEP meeting? And before you answer, I want to share that we had put out a video on TikTok and Instagram with some tips on how to prepare for the meetings. And some of the comments we received include, you can't get your child an IEP for being bipolar. And another one was, he'll grow out of it. Jenn, tell us what you've heard and how parents can think about responding to this.
So you can get an IEP if your child is bipolar, and the grow out of it thing. But this is like, there are things that you hear at an IEP meeting that make you feel like, am I crazy? So one of the things that you hear is, your child is approaching grade level. And that is not the same thing as not being on grade level. That's like the kind of stuff that makes you feel like you're insane. And that is something that I can't stand. That is a wild thing that I hear. And consequently, the person that heard that just won her due process complaint last week. She just told me. Yes.
And we're going to get into your rights as parents, and what are the things that you have the right to request. But there's been so many, because you're part of parent groups and you're doing this day to day with your own child. So when you hear these sort of comments, right, that take you back or like make you feel like, what? How should parents respond? Like what can they actually do after their sort of moment of shock of like, did I just really hear that? What can parents do to address that?
Well, I think that, maybe when you hear something like that, you sort of want to take the whole thing and put it into perspective. So sort of remind everybody where you are. Like, we're at an IEP meeting, and the IEP meeting is a place where you talk about what's going on, you talk about what's necessary, and then you talk about how to get there. What are the goals and how are you going to get there? What are the human resources to get to those goals? So wherever you heard whatever ridiculous thing that you heard, everything matters. So if someone did say to you, he'll grow out of it, that is actually an important piece. So what part of that conversation should remain? So I disagree that he'll grow out of it. Could you write that down? Where are you going to write that down? Are you going to write that down in the present levels of performance that he's going to grow out of it? Please write that down there, and write down that I disagreed with you. Just do that now, please.
And this makes a difference to have it on the record, right? That you've asked them to put this so that anyone that's involved in the process for your child, for your IEP, your child's IEP, they're aware of all the comments being shared.
Right, exactly, because this is not an informal discussion. This is about your child, and so, you're not here to joke around. And so if somebody's doing this to say he'll grow out of it, I'm not here to have an informal discussion with you. Everything you say has to go down. So if you're saying that and you're serious, be serious, write it down.
So some of the comments that are coming in are, your kid is smart enough, doing well enough. Your kid gets good grades. You're better off getting an external evaluation. And that was a duplicate. So, and the one that you shared in the video that you did with Helpful Tips was, you're too smart, right? Your child's too smart for an IEP.
Oh, I really.
All right. So now, thank you for sharing these comments. Let's get into the preparation, right? Because there's a lot to prepare for before the meeting, but also what you should do during the meeting. So let's get into that. Walk us through that process, the before and during.
So before an IEP meeting, this is a formal process. You should prepare, right? So there's going to be things that everybody reads. And you are, as a parent, you are a member of the IEP meeting. And you're an equal member. So you should be getting a copy of everything that every member has read. So you should have a copy of all those things. And if you have something to share with them, you should also be sharing those things as well. So if your child is going to Taekwondo class every week and he does well or he doesn't do well, your Taekwondo instructor writes that down. Have that also shared with the IEP meeting. They must consider that.
So reports, right? The IEP goal progress reports, and that's really important because it's their parental right, correct?
Right. So you as a parent are allowed to share any report. And even if it is your child's Taekwondo instructor and it's not like a special education teacher, it is still about your child and your child's performance in like a learning environment.
And there's also, you've mentioned substantial tests, new evaluations. Can you give examples of that?
Right. So most children in a New York City public school from grades kindergarten to 10 will have a test called like the beginning of the year assessment, middle of the year, iReady. And so a lot of parents actually don't even get that information, but ask for it. Don't let them tell you in the middle of the IEP meeting. Make them give it to you so you could read what that is. And if you get that before the IEP meeting and it's a bunch of numbers, make sure that you ask them, what do these numbers mean? And so that you can understand. You don't want to do that at the IEP meeting because it's stressful enough as it is. And there's not enough time for you to process this.
And how soon, like how much time should they give themselves to request all these reports and gather all these things?
So there is like this timeline where if you requested an IEP meeting, you requested evaluation, the district should have everything done within 60 days. But you should at the very least get all of your reports at least 7 days prior to the IEP meeting. But there's no rule saying that you can't have it before. So if the district had the report a month before the IEP meeting, you should have it too. Why should they hold on to it longer than you?
So make sure, as a parent, make sure that you're requesting these things as soon as you have the meeting scheduled. Request these progress reports. Start gathering your own sort of reports from other like evaluations, etc.
Right.
Correct?
And your reasoning is, I am the parent, and it doesn't even matter if I'm a special education teacher or not, or I'm a neuropsychologist or not. I am a parent. This is an emotional process for me, and I need time to evaluate and review everything because it's hard.
So there's the stuff that you're gonna get from the schools, and the stuff you're gonna get from like the taekwondo or any activities that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's
or
also
your doctor,
yeah,
psychologist, anybody.
There's also the stuff that you should gather on your own, right? So you've talked about, and we have a cheat sheet that we'll share. Anyone that wants it, we have a whole guide that Jenn did for about this whole planning process and review. But we also created a cheat sheet that we can email just to give you like a little checklist of the things to keep in mind, because it is a lot. So the things that you should gather on your own. What are some of those things? You've talked about concerns, status reports, your ideas, coming up with new goals. Talk a little bit about that.
So if the school has created reports, you can say what you think of them. If the school has said, oh, your child has met the goal of writing a 5-paragraph essay, and you see your child's homework and you've never seen him attempt to or successfully write a 5-paragraph essay, then you can write down, I'm sorry, I've never seen that done. And you can give them samples of how their essays that they've done.
Right.
Just like that.
And you talked about like organizing ideas, like what should be an accommodation in IEP, and like how you can use this as a point of discussion. What does that mean?
So you can, not only can you write your ideas or your opinions of what are the teachers' reports and what are any reports, including if they've done an evaluation and how you disagree with them, or that you agree with them, or thank you even, this was a great report. But you could also write down your ideas, because the purpose of the IEP is not to go to grade 9 from grade 8. The purpose of the IEP is to prepare your child for further education, future employment, and independent living. Starting from kindergarten, you have to be thinking like that. And so everything you think about matters. And so you're talking about that, you write that down, and you offer it to the IEP team, your thoughts about what kind of accommodation should they have, what kind of goals should they have based on everything that you've read so far.
Is there a type of accommodation that parents maybe haven't asked because they thought they couldn't ask? Have you heard any of that? What type of accommodations they can always consider?
Well, all accommodations are supposed to be based on what the child needs. And I think maybe what's most common is that schools, especially from K through 8, schools are constantly telling parents it's all about what happens in the classroom. But again, like I said, it's about further education, future employment, and independent living. The job of any school is to graduate children. It is not the job of the IEP. So it is about children, becoming their best selves, making appropriate progress in accordance with their unique strengths. I'm not just saying that this is my opinion. This is what's on the IDEA. And so this is their job. They have to do those things. And so if you keep going back to that and asking them that, and basically they should be asking those things. If my child can do the work in class, but when they come home, they can't do anything, this is a point of discussion.
Right. So let's get to the actual day of the meeting. There's some game-changing moves that a parent can make to make that meeting more manageable, right? More digestible for them. So talk about some of those tips.
One of the things that I really want parents to do is, please don't go by yourself. I don't even go. I have an IEP meeting coming up in 2 weeks. I'm going by myself, for my own kid. And even though this is my job, it is, I can't help but be nervous. I might have ideas about what I want to say, what I want to accomplish. And when I get in there and I see my child's face, or I will forget. I'll get emotional. I'll see the teachers my kid loves. I'll just forget. And I need my friends there, because my friend will remember what I want. I look at my friend's face and I'll remember, just looking at her face, she will remind me of who I am, what I want. And even then, she'll also be writing notes for me. And I won't feel like I'm outnumbered. And for so many years, when I go to these meetings, I just felt outnumbered. They don't even call me by my name. They call me mom. That's like the worst thing. That's like calling me Miss Blank, Miss Fill in the Blank. I hate when they do that. And I hope that if you could just start off your meeting by saying, the first time anybody calls you mom, just say, could you just call me by my name? And you'll watch
You're
people,
not your mom.
you'll watch people not be able to do that because it's such a bad habit.
Yeah. It's like removing you're actually talking to, you're talking to a mom or to a parent, but you're removing kind of the moment here of like, this is an actual human being that's going through a very emotional and important process for their child's education. And so to be referred to as just a mom, it's kind of making it very generalized,
right? Hey, blank. Hey, next. I don't call you, hey, teacher, hey, school psychologist, hey, principal. I call you by your name. If I ever did that, you would look at me like I'm crazy. But for some reason, you're allowed to call me mom. That is completely derogatory, and they have no idea this is part of the culture, and we just have to change it.
Right. So that's, speaking of bringing a friend to make sure that they can help you take notes and remind you, right? You're prepared with everything, all the reports, your questions, your ideas. But yeah, when you're in the moment, it could be very easy to forget. Another thing that you is important is the recording. There's two aspects of recording. Tell us about that.
Right. So thanks to the pandemic, I don't know, but because of the pandemic, so many IEP meetings are being done by Zoom or being done hybridly like this, and so having your meeting recorded can serve two purposes. Number one, it's so emotional. Taking notes while doing this is nearly impossible. So why not record it so that you just know? There's even AI note-taking services now. The other thing is, and you as a person in New York State do not need to request permission. You don't even have to tell them that you're recording if you don't feel like doing that. But you can just go into the meeting and start recording. It's better to just let them know in advance. And then they could also learn that they can record. But if you want them to record it, you could tell them a day in advance, just one day in advance, that you would like them to record. They'll record, and then now you'll have access to their recording. But the other good reason for recording is, number one, if you have a child that's maybe 13 and they're going to go to their IEP meetings eventually, you could say, hey, do you want to watch your last year's IEP meeting? Here it goes, And so, but also,
have you done that with your child?
He's been to his, so he doesn't have to watch a recording, but I have for my clients recorded IEP meetings so that they can watch it for the next year. It's just a great way. Why would, why not just watch your last year's IEP meeting if you weren't there? This is how it's going to be run. These are the conversations. This is the vocabulary that they use. But the other reason is, I feel like when you're being recorded, people just sort of have to remember to just follow the rules. But the other thing is, if they do end up saying something wrong, then you have a piece of evidence right there.
So there's two ways to record. You can record it on your phone using whatever audio tool you have, whatever audio app, or you can request a formal recording.
Right. They'll probably just use whatever Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet that they use.
So we have some comments. Beth Litt says yes, she's suggested recording, also bringing someone. We also have a question from a parent. If the child is doing well academically, can they say that the child no longer should have an IEP, which we talked a little bit at the beginning?
Well, they can say whatever they want, but that doesn't mean that it's okay. So there is something where the student cannot be denied services just because they're making grade to grade level progress. However, that doesn't mean, but still a student's grade is a part of their picture. So it's one thing that you have to remember is that no one should use one source to make a judgment on a child. So if the child, got 100 on the region, so fine, they don't need a service anymore. That's not a good reason. They should never use one source. So report card grades may be considered as one source. They shouldn't be using that. But, the better question is, did the child meet his goals? And
so flip the question, right?
Right.
If they're saying that, well, your child's doing academically well, they don't need an IEP, the parent should then immediately use the information from what goals were set and whether there was some progress, if they were met.
Right. What was the purpose of the child's IEP? The purpose of the child's IEP, there were goals involved, and maybe the the goals weren't about getting a good grade in math. Maybe the goals were about making sure that the child knew how to wake up on time to go to school, or make a good to-do list when they got home, or maybe learn how to say hello to people when they walk in. I don't know what the goal was, but the purpose of the IEP is to prepare a child for further education, future employment, and independent living. And some of that does involve pre-calculus or involves geometry, but some of it also involves saying hello to people and being nice. There's so many things that can be a part of the IEP. And many people in schools are misguided that it's all about academics. It's just wrong.
Right. I'm going to take just a moment to just say that we are streaming in Spanish, so I'll say a quick line, just a moment, please. Si desean escuchar esto en español, tenemos una traducción a través de Zoom. Pueden llamar al 929-436-2866 y el código es 858-1315-6764 y presionen la tecla numeral. Okay, thank you for that. We have another comment, and it's from Olympus NYC. My kid is doing well academically, but a DOE autological evaluation found some significant autological processing deficits. Are they still on the hook for providing the recommended hearing therapy?
Well, so now you're in an IEP meeting, and there is, you as a parent are a part of the IEP team. You have evidence that you're presenting to the group where there's an auditory processing evaluation, and it's probably recommending services. That's still one, albeit a large piece of evidence. There might be other pieces of evidence that the team does have to consider. And I think this is really important. The parent is a member of the IEP team. Maybe the student also wants to be a member of the IEP team, and maybe she's too young, but maybe the student wants to write a little statement to the team saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, this is hard for me, this is hard for me. And that could also be a statement that is sent to the IEP team. Then the IEP team must consider. And if the parent finds that the rest of the team is not considering it, that's a problem. I think parents have to understand that they must be considered. And I think oftentimes they're not being considered. So they need to tell people, you need to consider my opinion, and you need to consider my evaluations. And the way you need to consider it is by saying, I disagree with you, Mom or Mrs. Jones, because you said this, but in fact, it's like this. That's consideration. But you can't say, thank you, Miss Jones. Thank you for what you said. Thank you. That is not consideration.
So what I'm hearing is we need to make sure that there are multiple sources. You can't rely on one source to make a determination.
That is the law.
That is the law, according to Jen, and she's been doing this work for a long time. The other piece is also making sure that you remember that you're not a passive member of this meeting, of this process. You are the parent, you have a voice, and you should make that be heard, right? And so the writing these things, putting them down and asking the question back to them and pushing on this, because it's not just on them to decide what is most beneficial for the child.
Right. I mean, the first thing I should say is that I'm an advocate. I'm not an attorney. Even if I was an attorney, the first thing anybody would say is that, this is an educational purpose and it's not a legal purpose. So please make sure that if you really need an attorney, go find one. That said, though, it is important that people have to understand that parents are a member of the IEP team, but they are not the district representative. The district representative must consider all the members of the IEP team. And so if the parent doesn't feel like they're being considered, they need to say that out loud. You're not considering my opinion because I said this and you're not giving me a response to that. I have an evaluation here and you're not contesting it. You haven't said anything about what this evaluation says. They have to say something. Otherwise, what is the purpose of having this evaluation? Are you disagreeing with it? Say so then. Why are you disagreeing with it?
And this is part of the things that during the meeting you need to remember, right? Is whatever wild statements or disagreement that you have, make sure that it's put in writing, right? And
Right.
Where you mentioned
wherever it belongs. So if we're having a discussion about the present levels of performance of the child, you don't think that you don't see anything, write it there. And also write down that I disagree with that because I've seen it. And you need to write down that I disagree with that part. So all the time, whenever you see something and you have to disagree, write it down. But, towards the end of the IEP meeting, when the real disagreements about like services, that's another place. And that's another place to write your disagreement.
So I want to get to some questions. We have Samantha Fong. Hi, Jen. How much of a role does the IEP coordinator at your child's school play during the IEP normally? There's a new staff person this year, and I'm nervous that they will not back me up.
Okay. Back you up. So well, I think the most important thing is the IEP coordinator sounds like it's a job that was developed by the district to handle the management of scheduling IEPs. But I don't know about backing up anybody. I don't know if that person is aware of your child, how well they know your child. And so backing you up, maybe I'm not sure if, that's the word that you wanted to use, but what you would always have to make sure is that you have to present all the evidence necessary. If you want certain things on the IEP, like let's say, on the IEP, your child has to be able to have a high five at the end of every period. That's like a must.
So what
You
should
have to
really
put it
back you up is the evidence,
Yes.
what you've got from the reports, the information that you've gathered, your questions, your ideas. That should be the base to back up whatever requests or concerns you have about your child.
Right. And whether it's the IEP coordinator or your teachers that you know, make sure that they contribute that evidence.
Okay.
Or and if they don't want to, then find the emails that they wrote to you in which they said that and send that in to the IEP team as evidence.
So we have a question from Jonathan Mitchell. What is the process of getting the DOE to approve or a neuropsych after your initial request for one?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you. So everybody gets the procedural safeguards, and I think like no one wants to read them because they read you your rights like they're Miranda rights, and it's just the most awful feeling. But I think in that little packet they tell you that you can have the rights to an independent educational evaluation at the public expense, and one of those types of evaluations can be a neuropsychological evaluation. And that's basically an evaluation done by a psychologist, not a psychiatrist, a psychologist who does a bunch of tests and will be able to diagnose your child with a bunch of disabilities, learning disabilities, psychiatric disabilities, things. And then they're supposed to, as any good evaluation should, give a list of recommendations as to what should happen. That is what a good evaluation should do. It should have tests. It should have clinical impressions. It's not just a bunch of tests and numbers. It's a doctor saying, I think because of these numbers, because I've talked to all these people, I have clinical impressions, and therefore the diagnoses are X, Y, and Z, and therefore I have recommendations for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And so the parent should, most likely the parent has gotten a psychoeducational evaluation that the district has done. That's where they've gotten an IQ test and a set of achievement tests, where they've done like math, English, math and reading and writing tests maybe. And you disagree with that because it wasn't comprehensive enough, and you need something more in depth to learn how your child needs to make more appropriate progress. And you ask for that independent educational evaluation at the public expenses, specifically a neuropsychological evaluation, and tell the district that if they do not approve of your request, that they should file a due process complaint or an impartial hearing against you, or give you the authorization. It's one or the other. That is the law. They have to do one or the other. They have to say yes and give you the authorization, or file an impartial hearing request against you. And they don't want to file an impartial hearing request against you.
Thank you for that. We have another question from Idania. For a student with ASD that is doing academically well in high school, can we add IEP goals related to their social difficulties, making friends, going out with friends, etc.?
Yes. I've actually had an IEP goal for friend making, and because think about it like this, you go to college and you need to know how to find a job. And sometimes it's going to be your friends that help you find a job. Being able to go outside and read bulletin boards and join clubs and join fraternities and get to know people, that's a really important way to find a job or to not be lonely. And again, prepare you for further education, future employment, and independent living. Please remember this line, because that is the purpose of the IEP. Every time you walk into an IEP meeting, especially in high school, they keep making you think like the purpose of the IEP meeting is to graduate you from high school. And that is the purpose of everybody in the school, not just the kids with the IEPs.
So the year by year goals is a long-term game. It's a long-term process. So like the goals should be looked at annually, but the big picture here is everything you mentioned about preparing them for life.
Right. And so for the kindergartner, you're not going to be looking at writing a resume, but at the same time, it is about working towards that direction. And so for somebody who needs friends, I would think that that's an immediate goal for every year. But yes, they do need to make friends, because first of all, if you don't have friends, you can be really lonely and you can develop lots of other things, and that can become an immediate threat to academic performance. So let's not go there, and let's start making friends.
Speaking of making friends and sort of at what age, kindergarteners versus high school students, right? At what age does it make sense, or should the child start attending those IEP meetings?
So I like to not think about should so much, because kids are all different. And participation can be in so many different ways. So some students may want to first come to their IEP meeting by just dropping in, saying hello, leaving. Some kids might want to participate in their IEP meetings by writing a little memo and saying, this is the stuff I want. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Think about how hard it is for parents to be at these meetings. We're having this big talk here because it's so hard. Can you imagine a kid walking in? Think about it like this. When does anybody ever go into a meeting where everybody in the room is talking and every single sentence is about how you're performing? That is a horrible meeting. That is an intervention. That is like a comedy roast.
Mm-hmm.
That is not for a child with a disability under the age of 18.
So they should just pop in and say hello. You mentioned something about 14-year-olds. Yeah.
It should be planned with people who love them, and it should, so they're supposed to be invited by law, but nobody should force them.
So, and they can start being invited at age 14. Is that what you mentioned before?
So by 15, by the time it's a little complicated, but by 15, they're supposed to have something called a coordinated set of transition activities. So before they turn 15, they will have some vocational assessments done. But basically, just think like this. By 14, 15, they're going to be invited. So you as the parent should be prepared that around that time, they're going to be invited. So how do you want to prepare for them to be integrated into this process, to be introduced? Because basically what I've seen the Department of Education do is give the students a letter, and that is it. You're going to be talking about yourselves and what you like and what you don't like and how you're going to go and live by yourself on your own. The word college isn't even mentioned sometimes. This is not the way to, and sometimes parents will be fighting with the staff at the school. Are the children prepared to see that? It's a very awkward situation, because the kids love their teachers sometimes. They don't want to watch that. And so a lot of preparation has to go into it. Sometimes we can have like just 15 minutes dedicated to the student, sharing their thoughts, and then they could leave. They don't have to stay for the whole thing sometimes.
So that's something to think about. If once they're invited, have a plan of how you want your child to be incorporated in that idea of like maybe it's just a few minutes where they get to share how they're feeling, how their progress is going.
I think that whoever gets to the student first to plan that out it's the best way, basically. And like the student has a lot to say oftentimes. If you just look at the IEP and you look at the list of accommodations, ask the student, are you getting this? No. Are you getting this? Yes. Are you getting this? This is really good. I really want that next year too. Go over that with them.
That's great.
They'll be able to tell you.
Yeah, this is their lives. And they know what they're experiencing the best, right?
And if they're going to college or some sort of training program afterwards, they'll be able to talk about this.
So we've talked about parents' rights. We know that school staff may get things wrong because they may not have the latest information, they're misinformed. And I think you mentioned like adding services, the right to access report, where to make a complaint. So can we talk about some of these parental rights that these are resources from adding services, which I think sometimes there's pushback?
Right. So for some reason, I'm not sure exactly why, but I feel like in New York City alone, there's this thing where annual reviews are chaired, with the district representative is not a school psychologist. And because of that, the person who is the district rep, who's the decider, the chief decider, cannot decide on putting certain services because they are not qualified to. So this is a them problem. This is not a parent problem, right? And so if that's the case and you think you're going to want services, then just tell them, I'm going to be wanting to talk about services. So if that's the case, get somebody else to be district rep. And if they say, well, we can't, they'll complain first so that they don't waste your time. That's the first thing, because there is no reason why you can't have a meeting to talk about these things. If they say we can't have services added at an annual review, yes, you can. It's just that the person that they keep putting at these annual reviews is unqualified to add services. It is their fault, not yours.
Sounds like a them problem, but it is your problem, but you can speak up about it and it's your right. So in your wonderful guide, which we featured in the Unmuted, if you haven't subscribed to the Unmuted newsletter, you must, because you have access to important resources like Jenn's guide, and we'll put it on screen. But the other thing you mentioned, I remember, was where to make a complaint.
Oh, there's so many places, but
and we linked that in the article, so we can email it to you. But we have a QR code right on the corner of the screen. So if you're watching on your computer or your desktop, you can use your phone to take a picture, or you can email us and we'll send you the link to the article.
Before we go to complaint, I do want to say one thing. The parents have the right to talk about every single word on the IEP. They are meaningful participants. Every check mark, every single word on the IEP. If they want to, since we have Zoom now, you can even ask to put the IEP on the screen. Please use share screen, put the IEP. Let's look at the words together and let's make up the sentence together. I know that some people might look at you like you're crazy for even asking, but there's really no reason why they can't do that. So, and if you can't get it all done within the 45 minutes that they gave you, then fine. We didn't get to talk about everything. And the parent has the right to talk about every single thing on the IEP. So if you didn't get to, ask for a second day. That's it. And then, so complaint, because if they didn't let you, then you're going to have to complain. You don't have to file a due process complaint for that. You don't have to file a mediation for that. That's just wrong. I really like to just call the special education off. Well, first I like to just call 311 and to just call the number we'll leave it there.
Mhm.
It's a 718 number, and you just get a ticket number, and you just, because your rights were violated. Basically, I was not allowed to finish talking about things on my IEP, on my child's IEP. And I would like a ticket number, please. And that's it. And then you get the ticket number, and then you write to the special education office, special education at schools.nyc.gov. Put the ticket number in there and say, and briefly explain what happened. They need to know. If you want to add your superintendent,
Do
another
it.
person.
Go ahead. We'll put the link to the guide. Fun fact about 311. 311 codes are really important for the cities to track data and be able to deploy resources. So when you're making a complaint or a call, it's important that not only you send an email, but you use these numbers and resources to make sure that that's captured, because this makes an impact in a sort of bigger picture for future students, for future families in dealing with this whole process. There was one more thing, and then I'll see if there's more questions before we wrap up. Ask and share.
Oh my gosh.
And she has some here.
This is so
and we
fun.
can email these to you, but these are available on the DOE website.
So I noticed this one day when I was going into the Welcome Center, because I know everybody is still, a lot of people go on the internet and they get all these PDFs. But if the Welcome Center still has paper copies of things. And because the IEP process, especially, people feel really rushed, and they don't get to talk about these things. And you really want to know, before you walk into an IEP meeting, did my child meet their goals? And you want to be able to talk about all these things, and you feel so rushed. And so I really like using the Department of Education's own guidance documents to follow the rules, to ask the Department of Education staff to follow the rules. And so this is called Ask and Share, and it came out, I think, less than a year and a half ago. There's one for middle school, one for elementary school, one for high school. And since we're talking about goals a lot, I love this one picture. And so they basically are asking parents to, or, anybody could ask these questions, but what to ask, what to share, what parents can share, places to take notes. And they're literally saying, you can go ahead and ask, did my child achieve last year's goals? What goals did my child need before meeting the next IEP meeting? How often will you track progress toward each goal, and how will you know if each goal is met? I mean, these are awkward questions for parents to be asking at an IEP meeting, and this is the district telling you to go ask them this. So if you want, you can go to a Welcome Center, go pick up a whole bunch of copies, hand them to the teachers, or to the rest of the IEP meeting team members, or you can just give them a PDF link and ask them to look at it. And there's no reason why you can't use this as a guide to go through your next IEP meeting. And if they don't want to do this with you, you have the complaint number saying, they wouldn't do this with me. I was trying to be good and follow these really great instructions given to me by the Department of Education, for a student-centered IEP. Who else would it be centered by? Anyway, whatever.
So we're going to wrap up in a moment, but I want to thank you. Recap quickly as you prepare for meetings.
This is all in different languages too.
Yeah. DOE is required to have information in multiple languages. So if we need them in different languages, just email us. We'll get the links to you. So before the meeting, get all your reports at least 1 week before: IEP goal progress reports, new evaluations, substantial tests, teacher reports. Gather your own relevant materials to list your concerns in bullets or narrative, your status reports, organize your ideas on accommodations, come up with new goals. Bring someone with you for the meeting. Record, whether you request DOE to do it or you do it on your own. and put things in writing. Wild statements, disagreements, anything else? Any important takeaway as we wrap up?
I really hope that parents will always be able to communicate with each other and share information and try to create change together, because like this has to stop. The same things are happening over and over again, and like, we can try to do better in this.
Yes. Let's just get one more question in. When do the DOE's obligations end? We have a high school senior with 2 months left, IEP meeting tomorrow, and we still want to get him services.
So the obligations end when you graduate or when they age out, right? So if they get an IEP, if they graduate, they get a diploma, then the services end then. Or if they're not bound for a diploma, then they will continue receiving services. However, if the student did not receive appropriate services during that final year, they do have the right to file a due process complaint, and they may seek compensatory services.
Oh, wow. And one final comment. I noticed that they try to get away with measuring goals quarterly. I fight that every time. Should be 3 to 4 weeks at max.
It really depends on the goal. But I think that, if the student is showing that they need more close observation due to whatever the issue is, then ask for more. And then again, write down that you disagree. For everything you disagree, write it down.
It's your voice in writing and speaking up.
Right. And for all of the things you disagree, write it down and then offer it to them and say, here's the disagreements I had. You can put this on the prior written notice of recommendation, because I'm not going to expect you to summarize all my disagreements. What if you get it wrong?
Right. It's true. You want to make sure that it's not misinterpreted. And we have one more comment. How old can be a neuropsych report to be sent to the school? I have an old one, 2018, 2019.
That does sound kind of old. I would suppose that it's not that it can't be considered at all, but if depending on what the issue is for, like I wouldn't necessarily try to have a new IEP based on that. But if you're trying to demonstrate a pattern or a history, then an old neuropsych could help with demonstrating a history of something.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for all the comments, for all the questions. Thank you, Jen. Thank you to Adrian from the Worldsboro Bookshop for hosting us here. Follow the Worldsboro Bookshop on Instagram, literally the Worldsboro Bookshop. Follow Epicenter NYC on Instagram and TikTok. Follow Jen. What's your Instagram?
Oh, Special Ed Advocate.
Special Ed Advocate. We're going to have all of this information available after the stream. We have a really cool checklist. You can't really see it here. It's in English and Spanish. We have the guide that Jen created, and we have some tips that we're going to put on Instagram and TikTok. Please reach out with any more questions that you have. This is not the end of this conversation. We want to make sure that we continue to provide you with all the information and resources you need to make sure that your child is set up on a path to success. Thank you. Have a great evening and have a great week.